Hi and welcome to our online intro session on chairing effective meetings. I'm Alison Miles-Jenkins and I'm Chief Executive of Training to Achieve, and as our name implies, we've spent the last 25 years helping people accelerate their performance at work. Today I want to talk to you about something really important, and one of the reasons behind me speaking to you on this subject today is that a couple of weeks ago I wrote an article and it was called Meetings, Bloody Meetings, and I think that title sums up most people's attitude towards meetings. Too many, too long, too boring, a distraction from getting the real work done. And you know what? I was absolutely right, because that was my most read article ever. So what I wanted to do was to share with you 10 key tips to help you and your colleagues get more from your meetings and get a better return from the time invested in them back at work. Did you know that meetings currently are suffering from around a 51% inefficiency rate? So more than half of them fail. They waste time. They fail to meet objectives that your business so desperately needs. This slide here I've put together, which I think again sums up most people's attitudes, because if you're lonely at work or maybe feeling a bit bored, you don't like working on your own, feeling a little bit fed up, then what can you do? Well, you can actually hold a meeting, can't you? You can invite 20 other people to it. You can offload your views and opinions and listen to others doing the same. You can impress or bore your colleagues, and of course, all in work time. That's why so often we hear this little phrase, meetings, the practical alternative to work. So I'm really sure from my experience that my 10 top tips are really going to make a difference to the meetings that you have. So some of the difficulties, let's start there first of all, some of the problems and pitfalls with meetings. And again, please appreciate this is just a quick snapshot. Chairing, participating and taking notes at the same time. Now, how on earth can any chair manage to do that? These are all three really important separate roles that require quite different skills. To try and combine all three in one meeting is really a recipe for disaster. Then, of course, we have meetings, don't we, where people turn up and they're actually unsure why they're actually present in the room. So either there isn't an agenda or the agenda doesn't give that clarity of purpose. We have individuals who might dominate the discussion, and other problems like emotional outbursts, little side discussions, cliques forming and so on. And of course, all that can make it nigh on impossible for the chairperson to be able to control the meeting effectively, particularly if they haven't had any training. Even if they can produce an agenda, which doesn't often happen, is it a great agenda? And I'm going to be telling you about how to put together a great agenda that really motivates and almost guarantees that you get the results you want in a couple of minutes' time. Of course, once you've got that great agenda, the next part of the story is to be able to stick to it. So how do you do that whilst managing the time as well? So all this means that the chairperson has to have a really good set of skills to enable them to overcome all the difficulties and get that meeting working really well, so that they have what we call the sort of synergistic characteristics. So value add by getting people present in the room and achieving problems and making decisions that are optimum and better than the best person could have achieved if they'd sat there on their own beavering away at it. What about attention spans? You simply cannot expect people to perform well if they're sitting in a room with 20 others for 2-3 hours at a time. Their attention simply is going to wander, and you're not going to get the quality discussion and, perhaps more importantly, the quality decisions that your business needs. I often find as well that whoever is chairing the meeting doesn't understand what we mean by the group dynamics. So they may be very task focused with the agenda, but they don't really know how to knit together the people around the table so they are a productive, cohesive, motivated team. So finally, how do we actually inspire? How do we encourage? How do we motivate people to want to come to the meeting, perform really effectively whilst they're present in the room, and then, of course, most importantly, take the actions that have been agreed after they get back to work? So I'm going to give you a snapshot, and I'm going to be covering, as I say, 10 top tips that are really going to make a tangible difference to your business and to your meetings. So of course, meetings, one of the first challenges really is how do we get people flying together, if you like, in a unified team towards common goals and common objectives. So the chair is going to have to unite the group. In reality, what we often find is that people kind of do their own thing. So they either dominate discussion, maybe they sit there rather nervously feeling unable to contribute, or maybe they opt out. So if we multiply that by the number of people in the room, then we've kind of got this sort of scenario, haven't we? So no kind of group cohesion and people following individual agendas. And of course, sometimes that means hidden agendas too. If that's the result, then probably the chair and everybody else is going to go back to work, really, to be honest, feeling quite exhausted, a bit whacked out, and wishing that they'd had a much more productive time back at their desk. So let's find out what we can do to solve some of these problems, to get people motivated in the first place, during and after the meeting, and making sure that the agenda, the discussions, the decisions, and the meeting overall really hits the targets that you want. So do take some notes as we go through of anything that might catch your eye, because just 1 or 2 tips can really make a difference. I absolutely guarantee that. And then at the end of this short session, I'm going to be talking to you about one action that you can take over and above what we'll have discussed, which can really, really make a huge difference to your meetings and their effectiveness in your business or organisation. So on with the tips then. Here's number 1. If you're not using one already, and I suspect that you're probably not, change to an action-centred agenda rather than a laundry list or shopping list approach. And what this simply means is that if we do, let's mock up something very, very simple as an example here. So we've got our agenda, and then you can see if this looks vaguely representative of the sorts of agendas in your organisation. So let's put down 4 or 5 items here. So first of all, we've got apologies. Then we've got, obviously, minutes of last meeting. And then we've got matters arising. And then number 4, we might have secretary's report. Number 5, let's pick something quite light-hearted. It might be you're planning a summer ball for your employees. And so on and so forth, lots of other items, and then maybe AOB. Now, this is what we mean by a laundry list or shopping list approach. It does nothing, quite frankly, to help your participants prepare and the chair to control a great discussion during the meeting. So an action-centred agenda means, quite simply, that we're going to insert verbs. So this one will be to receive, for example, apologies for absence. To approve, let's go with that one, minutes of the last meeting. To progress, or you could have to discuss, matters arising. The 4th one, what is that? Is it a discursive item? Is it a problem solving? Do we have to sign off or ratify something? So this might be to approve the secretary's report. And then number 5, unfortunately, is to cancel the arrangements for the summer ball. So obviously, by having this clarity here, everybody can prepare accordingly. For example, on number 5, if it just stood as summer ball, people would probably come with ideas and would have put a lot of thought and preparation in. Can we bring +1s? What's the entertainment? What about the food and catering? What about the venue? And they'll come be bitterly disappointed to find they've wasted their preparation, because unfortunately, due to circumstances, this agenda is about having to cancel it. And then, of course, we've got AOB, the fly in the ointment at the end. This can be a hugely manipulative tool, because managers always complain to me. They send a draft agenda around, staff don't bother in their team to contribute to it, and then they raise issues under AOB, obviously at the meeting. Also, from a manipulative point of view, people can deliberately hold issues back that they want to raise, don't declare them for AOB, and then, of course, raise them at the meeting when no one else has had a chance to think about counter proposals and ideas, and people stand a much greater chance of railroading the meeting to get their own decisions taken. So it's a hugely manipulative thing as well. So my approach is actually to put A or B off the normal agenda, but you raise it right at the beginning of the meeting. So you'd say, has anybody got anything that's so important and urgent since we agreed the draft agenda that this now needs to take precedence and either go first or take precedence over some of the items on the list? And you know what? No one has ever, to my knowledge, stuck up their hand and say, yes, I've got an item that's important and urgent and has occurred since we agreed the draft agenda. So you get everybody with an action-centred agenda, much more focus, clarity on exactly how to prepare for each item. The chair has that clarity too, knowing exactly what the direction of travel is. Is it a decisional item? Is it a problem-solving item? Is it discursive? Is it an information-only item? And so on and so forth. So that, in a nutshell, is your action-centred agenda. And of course, on our training course, we go into that in a lot more detail. So let's move on. I also find that chair people, if they haven't been properly trained, tend to go to one extreme or the other. They either hate chairing and stick their head in the sand and are perceived as very weak chairs, or they go to the other extreme and they become really domineering, dominant, aggressive, and think it's their chance to kind of railroad the group. So obviously neither of those extremes are helpful. So here is tip 2. Chairs who are not subject matter experts but great facilitators. So we don't necessarily want the most senior person to chair the meeting. Why does that happen? Why put the subject matter expert, who we actually need embroiled in the discussion, in the chair? Because the chair, that role is about facilitating, guiding, gelling the group and so on. It's not about casting your pearls of wisdom and dominating discussion. So we want to have people who understand that, fantastic facilitation skills and understanding task and process. So the task is the agenda and the process is how you actually knit people together into a really meaningful discussion. And I found one really, really useful way of thinking about what you have to kind of manage at a meeting is this. It's kind of a 3 circles model, really. So if you think about it, at the meeting, the chair has got to be mindful of the task. That's obviously the agenda and the items on it. Then we've got the team, the group of people sitting around having the meeting. So these are absolutely vital to the success of it, clearly. And then, of course, we have to remember that the team is made up of individuals. And some of those individuals may be dominant, some may be shy, some people might not want to contribute and so on. But if they're at that meeting, they should always have a very good reason why they're there. So it's very, very helpful to think that probably in 95% of cases, the chairperson has got to try and treat each of these with equal weight, importance and respect. So be focused on the task, the agenda, but be very mindful of the group of people and the skills needed to mobilise and unite them and get really fantastic discussion going, and also to remember to protect the individuals within that team as well. So that's a really, really helpful model to keep in mind when you are chairing. Okay, so it's all about that balance, task and process. Get the balance right, you'll have a really, really productive meeting. And the mechanics, that's obviously about having the right timescales, a really good agenda. I've talked you through that process already to some extent, to have the right minutes and timescales, the room set up, all that sort of thing. Any problems with the mechanics can obviously dent the effectiveness of the meeting, but obviously it is the process and the task issues that are of real overriding importance. So let's move on now to what a lot of people call the soft, fluffy, pink stuff, and by that we mean the soft skills. And I think, in my view, nowhere are soft skills more important than when it comes to leading a group of people, particularly at a meeting. So these are game changers, really. So number 3 is make sure that you have clarity in terms of why you're calling the meeting. So what type of meeting is it? And most importantly, with the agenda, the objective of each item, so that people can prepare and discuss accordingly. It keeps focus and it enables the chair to really, really control that meeting well. And I've talked you through how to do that by inserting the infinitive of the verb in front of each agenda item. So clarity of type of meeting and objectives for each item on the agenda. And then tip 4, sticking with the agenda, so you can see that I'm really passionate about that because that's a guiding tool in the whole process. Get that wrong and kind of everything else is likely to slip out of control as well, is the psychology of an agenda. A good agenda doesn't just happen because the chair or someone else throws some items randomly together. We've obviously got that kind of process that I talked you through before with our action-centred agenda. And if you notice, the first 3 items on that agenda are what we call the standing items. So these are always in that order, and everything else is obviously up to you. Now, a good agenda means that really we recognise that when people come together, the first sort of 5-10 minutes, they're a little bit out of their comfort zone. Even if they meet quite regularly, they need time to settle in. Remember the stages of group development, these kind of apply. People are probably quite initially reticent of expressing views and so on. They need a bit of sort of settling down, chat and discussion. So you'd have some warm-up, low-key, low-risk items first on your agenda. Don't put those weighty, meaty, decisional ones right at the beginning. Those kind of go in the middle. And then towards the end, less important items again because people's attention span may be waning or they're having to dash off back to work. Make sure that the last item is a positive one so that people go away feeling really sort of buoyant rather than depressed. So again, there's a great psychology behind putting a structure together for your agenda. Number 5, don't take the minutes. So I've hinted at that already. It's one of those cardinal sins. If you're chairing, make sure that you appoint a minute taker. You're going to have more than your work's cut out to control the group and facilitate discussion and so on. And of course, there's an ethical issue. If you take the minutes and then you write them back afterwards, deliberately or otherwise, you could be unfortunately accused of being biased or tainting those notes and recordings of the meeting. Number 6 is again specifically soft, pink, fluffy stuff, your question technique. Remember the chair needs to have really good mastery of questions, open questions to stimulate discussion, to find out views, to make sure that they're not directing from the chair. And here we've got our 6 little words that prompt our open questions, just as a reminder. Also 3 different ways you could say tell me, explain, describe. These are fantastic ways of getting views from the group, honest, open views, rather than you directing through closed questions from the front, so to speak. Closed questions are great for getting people off the fence, winding things up, checking out, but not great for stimulating that discussion. That's what you need predominantly when you are chairing a meeting. Tips 7 and 8. So this one is obviously about if you have to put someone temporarily on the spot, make sure you don't leave them there. So it's about if you need to speak to someone about perhaps their behaviour, you do it in a very subtle way, or maybe call in adjournment and talk to them in a coffee break, something like that. So humiliating other people or tearing people off a strip in a meeting rarely works. And remember, you may need their support further down the agenda items. And then useful deflections. This is a great tip I want to share with you regarding control. So if somebody's waffling off at a tangent and you want to get them back, obviously rather than say, well, you're way off mark on that one, or actually you're talking about something that's off the agenda, which is a bit of a put down, all you need to do is to kind of use your body language and use their name. So you might say, Mike, let's is a fantastic collaborative word. Let's just return to the point when you were telling us about blah. So the analogy is like a fishing line. You reel them in back to something that is a useful contribution and then open them back out with your open questions. So that's a really, really good way to help the chair control discussion with those people that waffle off at a tangent. Tip number 9 is a fantastic tool. It's one I created probably about 20 years ago, and I've shared this with thousands of people who are now using it. You have a slightly different agenda as the chairperson, and really it's not to do with substance, it's to do with layout. So very quickly, what you would do is you would use your screen or your sheet of paper in a landscape way, and we're going to work in columns. So here you would list your agenda items. The next column would be for the initials of the people that you know actually want to contribute or lead on those items. Then you've got another column Again, just to help with your preparation, a few thoughts and points about issues you suspect will come out either from these leads or the group around the particular subject. To summarise then, we've got our items listed down here. For the agenda, we've got the people who are leading on those items. The chair also then makes notes of the sorts of issues and points they suspect will come up. And then again, the chairperson can have their own notes. So this would be a reminder of the points that you want to raise as chair. The idea really is that you allow people to contribute their own ideas first and then come in with your own views. So you're not kind of dominating from the chair. Then this is what I call my facilitation column. Because if somebody raises a point and you know it's not quite the right timing, you want to get them to hold on to that point. So I might say, Sue, if we can just park that point for a moment, let's pick it up under agenda item 5 instead, because it fits really well there. So I've got to remember, haven't I, when I get to item 5, to involve Susan. So these are little reminders to help me facilitate and make sure that I come back to all the relevant points. Then I have probably my widest column is going to be for my notes, because although I'm not taking the minutes, I need to be able to check the minutes that come through from my minute taker. So to make sure that I've got a robust recording, I'm going to put bullet points down there as well, key decisions taken, key points expressed and so on. And then that kind of famous or infamous column at the end, which is the action. So people's initials again. Who's going to do what as a result of the decisions that have been taken. So that's a very scribbled and rough version of a chairperson's agenda, which can really, really help. It also means, of course, that you don't need to take loads of different stuff into the meeting with you. This is just one document to do the work of several, and you might just want to take your reports and background papers and so on with you. And then finally, just as I'm doing now, tip 10 is, why not make it visual? I'm amazed, to be honest, how few chairs actually use this trick. So it's not just a tip, it's a bit of a trick really, because if you have a flip chart stand, for some of your more discursive and ideas generating type agenda items, it's really, really difficult if everybody, including you, you're all taking your own set of notes, everybody's trying to stay on track with the discussion. Whereas if you or someone else just kind of flip up the key points that are emerging from the discussion, everybody's focused, everybody stays on track, everybody's actually looking at the same thing. So everybody's perception of what's being discussed is more likely to be closer aligned. Now, I'm not suggesting that you stand up at a flip chart for the whole time, clearly, that you're chairing a meeting, but for certain items, making it visual saves time, it keeps people on track, it also triggers other thoughts, so you get better quality discussion, and it really, really does aid decision making. Oh, and I'm just going to throw in an extra tip really. Tip 11, as chairperson, make sure when you're going through a discussion before a decision is taken, you don't kind of stampede and take the last suggestion that's made as the kind of final one and give it more weight, because that's a trend that I often spot as well. So those are, in fact, 11 tips. So I want to offer you now, before I dash off, a final way of really, really strengthening your chairing meetings events and the success that you can get from them. And this is to download our Secrets of Successful Meetings e-guide. All you have to do is follow the instructions on the screen and your e-guide will be with you very shortly. And that is something you might like to circulate to your colleagues and also staff, because it's going to help not just chairing, but members get the most from productive meetings as well. So I've really enjoyed talking to you today. I hope you enjoy our guide. If you'd like to contact us about the chairing meetings course to be run in-house, then give us a ring or obviously get in touch via email, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.